Welcome back to the bait making channel, and today we're going to be focused on showing you how to make a Fire Craw bladed jig. And unless you guys have been sleeping under a rock, this has been the most popular bait over the past couple of springs. In March, in April, and May, when the water's dirty, those fish are starting to push shallow, guys have been throwing this red and orange bladed jig called Fire Craw up in those shallow water areas to catch really big fish. So today's video is focused on teaching you everything you need to know about making this color, making this bait, and modifying it so you can put the best components in your bait and making it for cheaper than you can buy it. This is my second video making a bladed jig. I have another one using a more standard style head, the Sparky head from Do It Molds, but this one's going to be focused on using the Poison Tail jig mold. I like this a little bit better because you get a better pour with it. It's a little bit cleaner, and there's a couple of different things you're able to do with the Poison Tail swing head mold when making a bladed jig to be a little bit more effective. So that's the mold we're going to be using today. But if you like your standard style arky head on your bladed jig, on your chatterbaits, then go over and check out that Sparky video. That'll be linked down in the description below. Everything that I'm going to be using to pour this bait is going to be linked down in the description below for you guys. It's all from Do It Molds, so it's really easy. Go to that single site, pick up everything you need, they'll ship it to your door, and you guys can be making these baits before those fish are pushing up shallow and spawning. So stay tuned, this video is going to be awesome. You won't want to miss this one. Let's go. So the mold that we're going to be using for this is the Poison Swingtail mold. Now this is a swingtail mold. It's not necessarily designed to have a hook put in this, but this is from 1/8 of an ounce all the way up to 1 ounce cavity. This is going to be perfect. It's going to pour super clean. It's going to allow you to really get that hook in there and get a good head pour even with that wire form in there. So the Poison Swingtail mold is the Do It mold that we're going to be using. Now the most critical component is this dude right here. This is your WEY 525 wire form. This is the same wire form that we used for the other bladed jig, and this is the same one we're going to be using for this. And then we're using the Owner 5121 spinnerbait hook. This is the 5/0 model. I like a big hook in my vibrating jig, so this is the hook that we're going to be using, and that's it. It's super easy to pour, and then we're going to be talking about the skirt colors here in just a bit. So those are the major components to make the actual jig. We're going to pour the lead, we're going to heat it up, put some paint on it, and then we'll get to actually putting the skirting on this bait. Setting up your mold to make this bait is really simple. You're going to take that WEY 525 wire form. We're going to make a 3/8 ounce jig. You're going to take and place that into your hook eye area. You're going to take the tail end of that and put it inside the eye of that spinnerbait hook, and then you're just going to line it up and close your mold. It's really, really simple. There's only those two components. Your mold's set. Now you just have to pour the jig through there. I'll show you that one more time. So again, setting up the mold for this is really simple. You're going to take that WEY 525 wire form. You're going to place it in the eye of the mold. Take your straight shank Owner hook. You're going to place it in like you would any other hook when you're making a bait. Then you're just going to close the mold and you're ready to go. Now you just got to pour lead through it. Now just like with any time you're pouring a bait, you got to be really careful. Take safety precautions. These are my heat resistant gloves. And then you're going to take and you're going to pour it into your 3/8 ounce cavity where that's loaded with your wire form and your hook. Really simple process. You just plug it in, pour it through, and there is your bladed jig with the Poison Tail head. So that's what it's going to look like out of the mold. It's a super easy pour. It turns out really, really clean and nice. The one thing that I don't love is there's no bait keeper on this. I've tried to modify the mold to have it take a bait keeper, but I've just not had a lot of success with it. So that's the only downfall of this. Now what I'm going to use is a pair of channel locks or pliers or whatever you want, and I'm going to take that sprue off, and then I'm going to use my file to file this head down and make it smooth. Now here's the most important step. Here's your WEY 525 wire form. This is a pair of round nose pliers. You want to take and open that wire form up just a little bit. If you guys can tell, there's a small gap right there, and that's where your blade's going to go through. You want to really clean up the eye of this bait. You want to make sure there's not a bunch of extra lead. There's not anything obstructing that wire form, because that's where your blade's going to go, and that's where your blade is going to be chattering back and forth. hence the name chatterbait or vibrating jig. That causes the bait to have a chatter underwater. So you want to really clean this up. I use my round nose pliers, or you can use your file, the back end of your file, to go in there and clean it up. But you want to make sure that it's as clean as possible, so it's essentially just your jig head and your wire form that's going to be the only thing contacting that blade. Now this is a really critical step I learned from the guys over at Jig Squad. When you're making a vibrating jig, you need to use heat shrink tubing to cover the eye of this. If this eye gets gummed up with paint, your blade won't move very effectively. So what you want to do is take 1/8 2-to-1 heat shrink tubing and just put it on the eye of that hook right there. So on that WEY 525 wire form. That's going to keep that clean. It's going to make it look really nice. So once you paint it, that's going to look great. So you're going to take this, heat it up on your heat gun, and then you can dip it straight into your Blaze Orange paint, which is what we're going to be using for the head color. What I'm going to do now to give my bait just that little bit extra is I'm going to take this, heat it up really quickly, and then I'm going to put a dash of black on the head of that bait. It's just going to give it a little bit more flair at the top, give it a little bit of contrast, and kind of a more finished look. So the last thing we're going to do before we toss this in the oven is just take off this piece of heat shrink tubing. If you leave that on there, it's going to be a big struggle to get it off. So take that off. You're going to hang the bait from your wire form in your oven, and that will give you your cleanest head. So when you go to stick the blade on there, it will work the best that it possibly can. So hang it from the wire form. It's going to make the bait work the best that it possibly can once that blade gets on there. So now that they're baked, this paint is really solid on there. It's not going to chip. There's not going to be any denting, or this paint's not going to fall off. So this is ready to go. And now we get to put eyes on it. Now we really get to customize. This is where we get to have some fun. The eyes that I'm using are brand new eyes from Do It Molds. This is their Attack series in the Warmouth color. I like this because it really matches that Fire Craw with the red and the orange and black in there. So that's the color that we're going to put on here. I'll have the exact sizing and information on the eyes as well as the paint and everything down in the description below for you guys. But this is where things get to be some fun. So for this, I'm going to use some Loctite liquid super glue. I like the long nose on this because it helps me position that super glue exactly on the eye cavity where I want the eye to go. And that's just going to lock that eye on there for pretty much the end of time. What you're going to do is you're going to take that Loctite and you're just going to place one single drop on that eye cavity. You don't need a lot. One drop is going to lock that eye on there. Then you're going to take a pair of tweezers with your Warmouth colored eyes. If you're comfortable, you can do it with your hands, but for me, I'm clumsy enough. I don't need my fingers being glued to a bladed jig. Position that eye in there. I like to position it with that moon eye segment looking down / just a little bit forward. And that's set. That's your eye on your bladed jig. Now you do the same thing on both sides, obviously, and you get your finished bladed jig with eyes on it. So I'm going to finish this process off camera, and I'll catch you guys here in just a second. Now that we have the eyes on that jig, that's what it looks like. Those eyes turn out pretty cool. That Warmouth color is really aggressive. It matches the head really nicely. I think it actually looked better the darker of a head you go. So if you go with like a black head, that would look really nice with that red backing, but that's what that head looks like with the eyes on it. It looks really cool. And now we get to put the skirting on the jig, and this is really what makes a Fire Craw bait Fire Craw colored. So the three skirt colors that I'm going with are silicone material red, a half a tab of this orange with gold scale. This is just to be like the transitional color. And then some orange with pepper flake. So basically what I'm going to have is 2 1/2 skirt tabs, and that's going to make our overall skirt color, that Fire Craw color. So this is what that skirt's going to look like when you have all of the tabs together, 2 1/2 tabs. 1 full tab of that red, 1 full tab of that orange with black, and then in the middle there you see that orange tab with the gold flake. Now I have a whole video that's going to explain to you guys how I use the wire when I wire tie this jig. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to do this really quickly, and I'll catch you guys here in just a second. So now we're pretty much done, and that's what your bait's going to look like. I like the 2 1/2 tabs, especially on your bladed jigs, because it's really, really full. It's going to give it a lot of movement and action in the water. So that 2 1/2 tabs is a little bit thicker than what I would normally go on like a swim jig, but when you're making a bladed jig, it's going to give it a lot of movement underwater. So now we're obviously going to add the blade. I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, and I'm just going to open up that wire form enough to slide that blade on. Now this is a blade that I got online. There's a bunch of different blades out there that you guys can find, but just find one that you like. Use your round nose pliers to tighten the head back down, and you have effectively made your very own Fire Craw bladed jig. Now you just need some sort of dual lock snap, and you have a very high quality wire tied skirt, ultra premium component bladed jig. So that's the entire process. That is how you make a premium Fire Craw bladed jig. Now these are obviously at a premium. This is the time of year that these are flying off the shelves. So if you can't find them, or you just want to make your own with ultra premium components, this is how you do it. These are the components that I use to make my Fire Craw bladed jigs from the convenience of the bait barn. All the components that I use to make this bait, from the poison swingtail mold to the hook to everything, is going to be linked down in the description below. But stay tuned for the video coming out next week that's going to be focused on making this trailer for your Fire Craw bait. It has a ton of movement, ton of action. It causes the head of that bait to be a little bit wider and looks different than anything else available on the market. So be sure to stop back next week when I show you guys how to make this awesome trailer for your bladed jig. It's going to help you guys go out and catch more fish. You guys have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section down below. If you're not already, hit the subscribe button to the bait making channel. Let's grow this thing. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.